welcome to the Reluctant Christian Feminist. I'm here today with my friend Keira. We're going to talk about raising girls, especially raising girls in a world that is sometimes clearly unfair. It's unfair to men and women, but it isn't unfair equally, I would say. So, we're going to talk today about what it means to be a parent and raise girls to be, strong, independent women in this world that is like that, and to still be women of faith. So, Keira, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Okay, so I'm Keira Dodd. I have two girls, 15 and 12. I am an English teacher. I teach 10th and 12th grade, so I'm also dealing with that teenage age. I have a dog and two cats.
Well, the people who are maybe watching the show or listening to a podcast are probably interested in the intersection of faith and femininity, or faith and feminism, which is also, I guess there's an intersection of faith and feminism and femininity. They're all just intersected there.
Yes.
So, what brought you into raising these? It's kind of a different tension sometimes to be in that place. So what brought you into that? Why is that a value for you? And then we'll talk about how to share our values with our girls.
Well, boy, from the very beginning, raising girls, I've been very intentional about not wanting to squash their spirit. So I was kind of speaking on this podcast is interesting because I feel like in a way I was a feminist first. So, I was raised Catholic. And then, I went to college, and a lot of things that happened there kind of made me question, my background and where I was and where I was going. And so I took a lot of classes on gender studies and feminism in college, and got really angry, I guess, about how I saw women being treated in the church, especially being Roman Catholic and not seeing women have any major leadership roles in the church. And some of the messages that I was getting about my body and my place. So I became more of a feminist. Let me also say, I'm half Italian. So I was raised in a very, a culture that has a lot of strong female mentors. So I also kind of was raised to be a strong woman. And so I came through college. I kind of explored with religion in different ways. When I had my girls, I did baptize my girls in Catholicism because I wanted them to have something like, faith, but I was still kind of like not sure about fully being Catholic. And then as the girls grew up, I just felt uncomfortable taking them to a church where they couldn't see women in leadership positions. So I did kind of, again, continue to explore. We were at the Unitarian Universalist Church for a while, but then, the girls weren't really interested in that, and I kind of fell off that. And then I mentioned, to my mom, tell Keira to check out the Episcopal Church. And so that's kind of where I've landed because they allow women priests and women bishops. Are the bishop of our diocese, the first woman of our diocese to be consecrated as bishop. So to me, one of the most important things is to see for a young woman to see that she can reach her potential, that if she is called to leadership, I respect that kind of calling. And I feel like it's not anyone's place to get in the way of that calling. If the Holy Spirit is calling someone to lead, it shouldn't matter what gender they are if they are called to lead a congregation, And so I didn't want to bring my girls into any church where they would feel second class or feel limited in any way. I guess my girls have been, in the forefront of my mind in terms of my spirituality as well. It's not just about me. I want to be a role model to them myself, and I want them to see role models in whatever church that we go to. And they are seeing that where we go now.
And I think most mothers and fathers actually feel that way too. We want to raise our daughters and our sons, but specifically we're talking about daughters because you've got two daughters and I've got one. So we want to raise our daughters to be everything that God created them to be. Yes. Sometimes I think our expectations can sometimes get in the way.
Yes. And I think it's very important to let them kind of lead. I mean, I will say this, I do this not just in spirituality, but I do it in every aspect. I mean, I started them out in dance, and then when they were like, we're not interested in this anymore, as long as they finish this, whatever the season or whatever, if they finish the year out, I don't force them to continue anything if it's not, their heart's not in it. I feel like it's very important to allow children to kind of blossom in their own way, because like you said, I think it becomes very toxic if, I'm putting my dreams on them,
Yes.
and then they feel like they're not living up to my dreams or, my expectations, and that would hurt their self-esteem. So
Yeah.
that's, I allow them to kind of take the lead in terms of areas they want to explore.
I think exploration is certainly an important point of parenting any child,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like we have this beautiful tiny little baby and we have really no idea what kind of human this baby is going to grow up
Mm-hmm.
to be. To some degree, I think we get some sense of personality in those baby years. You've
Mm-hmm.
had two, I've had two. There's clearly a difference.
Mm-hmm.
These two
Yes.
babies are very, very different. And you could probably say that about, anybody who's had more than one child could probably say every single one of them is, a little bit different. Um, so I think there's some things you can tell, like you can tell a little bit about personality, but you can't tell like what their interests are going to be, what their relationships are going to be like. And you think back to our own lives and the things that really had such huge impacts on us. A lot of times it's relationships. Like we, have an
Mhm.
opportunity, we have an opportunity given to us and we find out that we thrive in that opportunity. But there's lots of things I never had an opportunity for. I've never skied. I've never horseback. I've never actually owned a garden before, didn't know anybody. So there's maybe a ton of things I could have been, but just
Mhm.
never found, I didn't get to explore that. But my
Mhm.
point about exploring is whenever you start exploring, you are introducing your child into an activity where there may be failure.
Yes.
Like they,
Mhm.
they might try something out and love it, and
Mhm.
they might try something out and hate it. And
Right.
finishing, like you said, finishing the course is often a good thing, but sometimes it's also good to know when to quit as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think especially for me, it's like if you're committing to be on a team or in a show or something, I
Yes.
feel like it's important because I'm trying to show that, you owe a responsibility to your team or whatever to try to, unless I'm barring no, crazy circumstances,
Yeah,
obviously. I mean,
yeah.
if something serious happened and they needed to quit, that's completely different. But I
Yeah.
guess what I mean is, finish out the season. And then if you don't like it,
Mhm.
I'm always like talking it over with them. Hey, how did that go? I don't need to sign you up again, unless you're excited. An example of that would be she tried soccer, she tried volleyball. My older daughter
Mhm.
tried soccer, tried volleyball, and she didn't like them. She tried them out and then didn't end up liking it. But then just this past year, she tried swimming and she loved it. She
Mhm.
loved being on the team. She did it with her friends. So talking about relationships, it helped that she and two other friends all joined it together. And so, and then she got made a lot of friends on the team. And so, at the end of the season, I was like, do you want to keep going? Oh yeah, I want to keep going, and then she's even going to lifeguard, over the summer as her first job because she liked it so much. So I agree with you. It's kind of like I'm showing them that they can try new things, and it doesn't have to be like this lifelong commitment. You try, and if you don't like it, then you can try something new.
Yeah.
And then to kind of relate it back to spirituality, I'm not saying that everyone has a different path in terms of their spirituality, and I certainly had gone in different directions in my path. I think it's nice to have a thread, like a thread through the whole thing, that I can look back and say that there was a thread throughout my entire spiritual life. And I think it did come from my Christian background. And honestly, some of the stuff that made me angry was me seeing the faith I was belonging to not living up to the values that I saw taught, that were taught to me. When you're
Right.
talking about God being love, justice, truth, and I was seeing that the church wasn't living that out in how women were treated, and so me coming back to Christianity after being away kind of seemed, in a way inevitable, because when I came back, then I started to see how, I don't know, some of what I was taught before wasn't accurate, I guess, in terms of like, and I feel like I was allowed to explore and use my mind and then come to Christianity or come to God with my whole person. It's not like I have to shut my brain off. I think God understands and allows us to bring our whole selves to a relationship with God, and so I want to show that with my girls, that, that love, that thread of love or the values, it's always there, no matter what.
Yeah. Have you had any intentions or thoughts or ways to deal with gendered roles and gendered behaviors? Like a boys will be boys, or, boys are all over the place and girls are expected to be maybe well behaved, quiet.
Yeah, well, I'm not necessarily well behaved and quiet myself. So I mean, like that quote, well behaved women rarely make history. You've probably heard that quote.
Yes,
So
I have.
but I guess with my daughters, I've tried to I don't squash them. I don't, like, I want them to be the person they are, and it's not about gender, it's about who they are. And I am very aware that often girls are taught to like dial themselves down, and especially I would say with my second daughter, my younger daughter, boy, is she is outspoken. I mean, she has been, even when she was little, we would go into an elevator and she'd have no qualms about just talking to some, we'd be all in there and just saying something to the random man in the elevator. Like when I was a kid, I would have never just randomly talked to people, but she's very outgoing. She speaks her mind. My older one also speaks her mind. And I've taught them to share, be able to express their feelings, to set their boundaries. They know themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that I feel like I'm allowing them to be who they are, and it's not about gender, because I always come back to too, and I think you've said this on a previous podcast, perhaps, that there's more differences between individuals than between genders. Like it's because a lot of the stereotypes that we're talking about, and you said this at the beginning here, it harms men too. Like if there's a man who is nurturing and gentle, and as a father, that's their excellent qualities, or in touch with his feelings, that's amazing. That there's a lot of evidence that this toxic masculine type of culture is really harmful, especially for men as they age, because they have trouble sustaining and maintaining these relationships, because there's this fear of like sharing too many emotions with another man. And so when they go through a crisis like divorce, for example, when they lose their wife, they lose their friends, or they lose their emotional support, and they don't know how to handle that. And then their mental health suffers, and unfortunately that can lead to suicide. I mean, there's a high rate of suicide of men at that age. Women, I think, are taught more to be more emotional and share their feelings, but not all women are like that either. My older daughter is more reticent. She's not as likely to open up. I mean, it's almost, and this is a tip, I guess, as a parent, especially for her, really with both of them, the most important thing is just being present, because I never know when, especially my older one, is going to open up to me. If I just, sometimes it's at night, it's like I go up to say good night, and all of a sudden, mommy, can we talk? Or mom, I would like to talk to you. And I got to be ready for that. I got to be open to that. So, I feel like being present, letting them be who they are, not trying to put them in any kind of box. I think in general, we're too quick to label as a society or put people in boxes. And I think it's human nature to do that because we want to organize.
Yeah.
And if you organize, you feel like you're in control. Like, I understand this person because they fit this mold, or I understand that person, but you don't really. I mean, if any of us are honest, truly, we don't fit any mold. I don't think, unless someone is like intentionally trying to fit themselves into a stereotype, which to me would be unhealthy, I think we would have to admit that none of us fit any stereotype or any list. If we pull up a list of what a woman is supposed to be like, we're not going to fit every aspect. And same with a man. I think we get too pigeonholed by those kinds of expectations. And so as a mother, I don't do that to my daughter. I mean, another example for my older one, she loves math, and I remember when I was a kid, do you remember the Barbie that was like, math is so hard? Do you remember that? The talking Barbie?
I actually don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone out there remembers that. That was a big controversy, is that they had like giving the Barbie a voice, and it was like, the math is hard, but and it's like, why is this blonde Barbie having trouble with math? Like, there's this idea that science and math, when I was growing, I'm glad it's changing, but when I was growing up, it was almost like this expectation that, the boys will be better in these subjects and the girls are better at these subjects. And I have never communicated that to my daughters at all. And my older daughter loves math,
Yeah.
So
I do think that stereotypes like that are very dangerous. And there are still some inequalities when it comes to software development and engineering, where there just aren't as many women in those fields. But clearly women have what it takes to do well in those.
yes.
And then there are other fields where there's a lot more women dominated, and men could probably do just as well in that as well. So, in teaching, you might see, fewer male teachers. And I know a few male teachers who are amazing and excellent.
Yes.
One guy that I know is a really great kindergarten teacher, and you almost never see a male kindergarten teacher.
But it's so important for those boys to see that role model at that young age in the classroom. I mean, this is why it's like, to me, it's bizarre, because I also think it's sometimes upsetting when there's also this, like, making it sound like if a woman goes after these, like, supposedly male dominated fields, that she's even better. Like, we're still, sometimes we look down on anything feminine because, as women, I know that also with like that second wave where that's like women can be in the workforce, and you know what I mean? And there was a benefit to that. But like, I don't feel like that is not better than a woman who chooses to stay at home.
No,
It
there
should
is
be
no
a woman's choice. Like,
there is no better than. We need to get rid of the whole ranking thing. No
Yes,
one
like,
person is better than any other person. That just doesn't happen. There is no, this thing is better than another thing, or that person is better, or who is better looking. It just needs to go away.
Right. Because I just feel like, the danger there is anything associated with males is automatically stronger, better, so then for a woman to, I get prestige, she has to act like a man. Well, that's
what does acting like a man mean? What does that mean?
And what does it even mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just, I kind of reject all of that. I feel like each individual has their own, skills, preferences, talents, interests, and it shouldn't be a person is steered one way or the other based on their gender. I just feel like it's silly, because then, society loses out. Like, you've got, like you said, that teacher, that male teacher is an amazing kindergarten teacher. If someone had been like, men aren't kindergarten teachers, what are you thinking? Those kids would have lost out, so it really should be on an individual basis where people go. And I think that's God's will. I think that's because we each have our own talents and skills, and we're inspired to do certain things for a reason.
Yeah. Now, if I was going to summarize some of what we've talked about so far, it is number one, to be present with your kids. And I think paying attention to your kids and noticing them, that's so helpful, because I think a lot of times we tend to think in our own little shorthand of, oh, my oldest daughter always freaks out whenever this happens. Sometimes we have to test our own expectations.
Yes.
Is she really freaking out? What's really going on underneath the surface? And not to say that freaking out is the only thing you pay attention, because in my mind, there are things that I thought my daughter really loves or really hates, and only found out sometimes like I was wrong about some of these things.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know how I thought that, but clearly, like, sometimes we have to test ourselves and like really pay attention and be present with them. The other is to release expectations. And this is like allowing them to be the individual that God created them to be. And
Yes.
I tend to think that I really believe, I'm going to make this a quote, there are 8 billion different ways to be a human being. And because how your daughter is and how your daughters are, each one of them is completely unique and different. How my child is, both my children, both my son and my daughter, how they are is completely unique and different. And we have a tendency to sometimes to say, oh, she's just like my Aunt Martha, or, oh, I can see my grandmother in her. And we sometimes place those expectations on them, and we just need to release that and just allow, not necessarily even just the stereotype, but the family, like, oh, our family's so stubborn, or our family's very Italian,
Well, we do that to ourselves.
We do it to ourselves.
We have those I am statements, like, I'm an anxious person, I'm a perfectionist. And if you say them enough times, it really does, limit you, and that I do feel like that's one area I need to get better at, because I know my daughters are watching me. So it's hard, because I have struggled with feelings of self-doubt, or just, I feel like, just because of my background, and some of it was to be the way that religion was taught to me, where I felt like God was watching my every move and marking down sins. Like, literally, God has a book in the sky where he's marking down like every sin that you do. So then, I became such an anxious person, like this perfectionist, feeling like I had to live up to some, stereotype of holiness or goodness. And that, literally God is going to completely reject me, for every little mistake I'm making. I'm going to be doomed to hell, because I did this, or that, right? I did not feel that sense of unconditional love. So the other thing that I've been very intentional about with my girls is I communicate to them directly, like intentionally. I love you no matter what. There is nothing that you can do that will make me stop loving you. I mean, I say that to them all the time, and especially when we've had hard days where, they've made choices where they're not at their best. I always feel like I have to communicate to them, this was a hard day, or, maybe you made some decisions or did some things that you're not proud of, but I love you through it. Like, I will never go away. I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to be here through the whole, the mess, whatever this was, whatever happened, because, as they age, the mistakes they make, it's so dangerous to communicate to a child, that if you make a mistake, I'm going to reject you. Because what if they make a mistake, they go to the wrong party, or they get themselves, in a situation where they need their mom, they need me to come pick them up. I don't want them to be so scared of my judgment that they don't come to me. And I feel like that's how I was raised with God, that I was scared of God's judgment, so I didn't go to God, whereas now I feel like I'm really starting to see and like understand, and this is a change inside me, that God is there with me, and in whatever mistakes I make, or in any mess or any pain or struggle or strife or suffering, because that's all part of life, God is there, just like, because Jesus said God is Father, right? So as a mother to my children, I'm modeling that for them, that, I will never leave you. I am there with you no matter what. And if you get yourself in a situation, you can call me. We'll talk through it. I mean, maybe, you did make a mistake or something, but we're human, like, I did not get that message as a kid that I was allowed to be human. I was not. I was supposed to be perfect.
I found with my daughter, she tended to place very high expectations on herself and would try her best not to make any mistakes. And a lot of this is tied to her being, she was very smart when she was younger, like, very found school very easy. And so for her, she had to be good at everything. She had to be
Yeah.
smart at everything. So I read a book called Mindset. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Oh my gosh,
Mindset?
so
Go ahead.
good. So good. I'll put it down in the links. We're going to
Sure,
talk
yeah.
about a couple of books, but Mindset is a book that I had to have as soon as I read the book, I had to have her read it. And you may be familiar with the terms that come out of this book because she talks about growth mindset and fixed mindset.
Yes. As a teacher, we talk about that a lot.
Yeah. And growth mindset is basically embracing your mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. That's typical to human experience. But when you're so afraid to make mistakes that it keeps you from trying new things, that's really kind of sad. So this dance with failure, this relationship that we have with failure can really make a big difference in how we handle our mistakes. So as soon as I read this book and I saw her in that fixed mindset, like, you need to read this book. I think she was only 10 at the time, but we're going to cut this off immediately. We're going to be a growth mindset. You're going to love failure. You're going to fail and love it. So just seeing that failure is growth and failing forward, and it's okay to fail. And if you're not failing, then you're probably maybe not trying to do new and different things.
Right. You're not stretching yourself and you're not learning, because learning it requires failure. And actually, in our education system, I feel like that's one area where we don't do well, because we make failure this permanent thing. It's like kids are afraid to get a bad grade, or they start getting bad grades and then they're just like, I'm not going to try, because if I try and fail, that makes me look bad. But if I say I don't try and I get this F, then at least I can use that as an excuse, right?
Yeah.
So with all these like grades, this grading system that we have, kids can get, like, they label themselves as the system labels them, so it is important that we try to teach our children that, it's okay to mess up. You brush yourself off and try again, because that is how you learn.
Well, we do live in a performance-based environment. So everything around us is trying so hard to tell us what we're worth, how much we get paid, what kind of grades we get, the hotness of our spouse. So just kidding with that one. Just kidding.
Yeah, well, anything.
As mothers, how well behaved are your kids? So everywhere we're evaluated based on, people judge us and make decisions about whether or not we're worthwhile people based on these types of things. And this is why it's so hard sometimes to be okay with this. Am I enough?
Right.
That feeling of enoughness. Am I enough? And acceptance for who I am, not just what I do.
Right. And boy, do I have trouble with that personally. And that's why I worry, because it's like, I try not to do that with my kids, but they're watching us, as parents. And it's hard because I was raised too to, like, a mother is judged by how clean her house is. Like, does she remember every appointment? Like, am I doing, everything that I need to? Am I living up to, their expectations that society puts on me, but then I've internalized them. Where now I'm judging myself on those standards. And I try not to verbalize that in front of my kids, but it's difficult when you have that conditioning. Sometimes I wish I could, like, take out my brain and, like, wash it, get rid of some of this stuff, because you have these voices in your head, and I feel like right now what's nice where I'm at spiritually is I'm trying to replace those voices with scripture verses that are more like God saying that God's with me through my mistakes, still accepts me, loves me. I don't need to be anxious and afraid, so that, I can work on myself and then again, be a better role model to my daughters. I think that's important.
Yeah, that is, and it's just reminding me, I was trying to look it up, but Romans 12:2, that we are transformed by the renewing of our mind.
Mhm.
We are in the middle of a transformation. It's the Holy Spirit who's working on us. And I think that's one of the humbling things to realize that when we're raising kids, we're not perfect. We don't have our act together. And we
Right.
do come across sometimes our own childhood, difficulties and challenges. And sometimes we could have some limitations in the way that
Mhm.
we think about ourselves or the way we think about relationships or the way we think about gender roles. And sometimes it's very difficult to get out of it. And
Mhm.
add to that, in the past, some of the ways that I've read the Bible and specific clobber verses, which we talk
Yeah.
about, several times on this, podcast and this
Mhm.
YouTube shows, we talk about these verses that are often used against women. And so being raised in the way that I was, sometimes those come up too. Like, am
Yes.
I allowed to have an opinion? Am I allowed to be a leader? Am I, is
Mhm.
this my place to stand up? It's hard for women to take up space sometimes.
Yes.
When it comes to judgment and failure, and
Mhm.
sometimes being judged by others, as say that you are, trying out for a team and there's 10 spots and or 10 people working out,
Mhm.
and you get spot number 10, you get 10th place, you get dead last. Have
Uh-huh.
your daughters been in that? Because I know my kids have been in those
Yeah.
situations.
Well,
And in those times, I try to intentionally ask them how they think they did, how they're
right.
feeling, so we have time and space to not just dismiss the failure, but
Mhm.
really give give space and honor those feelings,
Mhm.
because those feelings are super important.
Right. I think, my older daughter, it was interesting because she'd never done it before. This was for the first year doing swim. And, it really challenged her because I don't know if you know anything about swim in high school, but those practices are long. There's some morning ones where she's getting up and going to practice at like 5:45 in the morning or something ridiculous. Um, but since it was her first year, obviously her times were not at the top, right? She understood that. There were times that she felt like she, was maybe a little down on herself. Can I do this? Especially at the very beginning with the early meets,
Mhm.
she was not sure she could do the, 100 like freestyle or backstroke stroke or something. And I had to talk her through it. Like, what's nice about swim is that you can see your times compared to your old times, and so that's what we were focusing on. Hey, look, you beat your personal record. And what was cool about her team is they did this thing where they passed out bananas if you beat your personal record at the next, like,
Okay.
practice. And so if she got these, two bananas because she broke her personal record in two different events, that's awesome. Like at the last meet, she did that. Yeah. Did she go on to districts or something? No. I mean, she's a freshman, and she just did this the first time. But it really is more measuring against yourself. And like you said, how do you think you did? Where are you improving? How are you improving? What does improvement mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't even necessarily, like, sometimes we take other people's yardsticks as our own, that we it's like we've improved if we get this score or get this praise or something like that. But if we can self-reflect and notice how we've grown, I think that should matter more. I mean, you're not wanting to let people down, obviously, like, um, you care about your team and things like that, but if you're trying your hardest and you're making your own improvements, that's something for you to celebrate for
Yeah.
yourself. So it's
I
not about being on the leaderboard, or I mean, that's nice, but yeah, I try to like celebrate wherever they are and what they've achieved.
Yeah.
That striving for more is also good, but it's not like, I also don't want them to identify their worth based on, like you said, these outward things
But
of like
it's okay. Like I said, I love failure because it does teach us things that we cannot learn with success. And
Mhm.
I'm sometimes thinking that if all we did in life was sit there and have one string of success after another, we would probably lack a lot of character. Just
Right. I mean,
really would.
yes,
Not that I want failure for character's sake, but it does. There are lessons that only learn that way. But
Mhm.
in one instance, my daughter had gone to with her school in middle school. She had traveled to do this presentation in some sort of job skill, and she did it on forensic science. So she had this, dust and fingerprinting thing, and so she had the dust that you do the fingerprinting with and stuff like that. And she turned it into kind of like a presentation, kind of a mystery theater, like, ooh, who was the one that did the crime? And it was like she had these comparison cards. When she showed up, she had never done this before. Her school had never done this before. It's the first time her school did that. So she had very little guidance about how to show, like how to go in, how to start the presentation. She was just ushered in a room. She asked for direction, like, what am I supposed to do? And the lady was like, we're not supposed to tell you.
Oh my.
So she was already like, okay, super nervous.
Mhm.
And then the worst thing that you could possibly do in this presentation, she did. She got really nervous and she spilled the dust
Oh no.
all over the place.
Yeah.
This dust is not so easy to clean up, and it's
Yeah.
pure black. It's the stuff they actually use for the fingerprints and stuff.
Yeah.
She ended up out of 14. I think and I'm guessing it's something like 14. She didn't get last place. She got like 12th place, but she had done so much preparation, but she was so nervous throughout the whole thing. She had a panic attack afterward, and she was away from home at the time. There was you can't look at that and say, well, you'll do better the next time, because that was a one-time shot type thing. And it was her last year of middle school, so she wasn't going to do anything like that again.
Right.
But looking back to that failure does make her, like, she looks back and she can sometimes laugh and sometimes cry at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she also knows, like, what she would do if she were going to prep somebody to go and do that same event. And she thinks also of the toughness of that particular time and how it's built her character.
Right.
It was hard.
Right. Right. I think it's important to, like you said, like, honor the feelings. It does hurt to fail. And sometimes physically, like if you fall, but emotionally, that emotional feeling of like, I screwed up, I'm no good. Like, but you have to replace that self-talk. It's like, yes, you screwed up and that hurts. And you're allowed to feel that hurt. Like I try to tell my younger daughter is, her emotions can be very intense and very strong. And sometimes she has trouble managing them. She's had panic issues. And, when I'm at my best, I just sit there with her, like, and let her feel them, and then come out the other side. I mean, the other thing is too, it's important to know and to trust that you will come out the other side. That, like, sometimes when you're young and even when you're older, it feels like those moments of failure, defeat, despair, you're stuck there, that they're never going to end. And then it relates to your identity. I'm just worthless. I'm never going to do well. And, and the self-talk is what you need to replace. It's like, yes, this stinks right now and it hurts a lot. And I'm disappointed in myself. It didn't turn out the way I wanted. But this is a moment, it's not like, if you can step back and see a bigger picture, like, this is a moment that will pass.
Yeah.
It's not gonna, like, be the be all end all of who you are. And these moments don't represent who you are, the totality of who you are. I mean, that's what's such a shame too, is a lot of times, if you're getting judged by these moments, it's like this bad moment, people see you and then they think, again, it's like we said before, they put you in the box, or like, it's not just you, like, other people are seeing you that way. So it's important to, be strong in yourself and to be able to talk yourself through that.
Yeah. And that was the last point I really wanted to make, was this point of raising our children to advocate for themselves. And that requires, the insight of knowing who they are and what their limits are, their personal limits.
Yes.
And then also when to ask for help and what they need. So asking for help can be, I need some time, I need some space.
Yes.
I need, I need accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I've taught my daughter to do somewhat successfully. She's 18 and going to college, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like she's super well prepared at advocating for her needs.
Right, right. I think first off, like to advocate for your needs, you have to be self-aware enough to know what you need,
Exactly.
and sometimes, people aren't given the space to explore in themselves to figure out like what they're feeling and what would help,
Mhm.
in the moments of turmoil or whatever. Um, and that's why, having the space to like reflect, breathe, think it through. I will say my older daughter is getting a lot better at that. She's being more of an introvert. She has recognized like sometimes I just need to retreat. She's got this like attic room, that we just renovated it. And so she's
Mhm.
lucky she's got this like teen suite up there. And so if she needs time, like I've taught her that she can say it to me. It's I read this great book. I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to mention it. I'm going to give this person a shout out. It's called Untangled, Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood by Lisa Damour. So Lisa Damour, thumbs up to you. I love this. I read this like years ago before my daughters were, even in the teen years. But it's been so helpful that, they need to be able to strike out on their own, but they need to be able to come to you as well, back and forth. Like she used this really awesome like metaphor, this imagery of the teen girls are like, they're like swimming out in the pool. Okay. And you're the side. All right. So they need to be able to like swim out into the deep end. But if they get too tired, from swimming out on the deep end, they need to know that they can swim back to you and rest on you, and then that's okay. Like it is like this, it's almost like a yo-yo sometimes, because I sometimes feel like, there are some days where, with either daughter, but especially my older one, it's like there's some days where she needs mom. She's, we'll watch TV. She still like kind of snuggles next to me. And I told them like, you could be 40 and snuggle next to me. I love you. You will always be my baby. But boy, do I soak those moments up. And then it'll be like the next day I'm chopped liver and she's wants nothing to do with me and she's off on her own. And I because of that book and because of that, like to me, that metaphor, that analogy works so well. It's like she's out on the deep end and she doesn't need me right now. And that means I'm a successful parent, right? Like it would be bad if she's clinging to me all the time, right? And it'd be bad if she were out there like drowning and not realizing she could come back to me. It's the give and take. And I can't take personally when she, even with this image, it's great. How like you push off the side, like she kicks away from me, and sometimes that hurts because as, especially early stages, like in the preteen years for my older daughter, I wasn't used to that. You're used to them coming to you and, when they kick away, like that can hurt. But I tell myself that is normal. It is normal for teens, and I think, teen boys too, any teenager needs to
Absolutely.
strike off on their own for a little bit. But they need to know that they can come back, and that they can need you. They can voice their needs to you, that you are safe, just like the edge of the pool is a safe place to catch your breath. I want my daughters to see me as their safe space, that they can come back to me and they can push off. And I'm not going to resent them from pushing off. Like it's okay to do the back and forth. And then for them to also, like I said before, like know what they need so that they can voice it to me and I can hear it. And again, not get personally offended. Like, I wanted to do family night. So how dare you take time? It's like, nope, she needs to go upstairs and take a breather. Then that's what we do. And so I also have to be flexible. I can't, like you said before, with expectations. I think sometimes we put expectations on our kids about how an event should go, or, and it's like, if she's having a bad night, I got to change the plans, and that's okay.
I've had to deal with that with both of my kids, where they both used to, come to me and feel very loving and snuggly. And now they had a talk with both of them. My son actually initiated a talk with me and said, I don't want you to. And he explained exactly what he didn't want from me anymore. And
Yeah.
it does, I have to like okay, recognize it's not rejection. It is growing
Yes.
up, and I'm a successful
Yes.
parent. But it is hard to deal with it. And then I think the other thing too is like when they're little, we're used to solving their issues for them. And so when they're striking out on their own and dealing with this failure and dealing with other people's judgment, oh my gosh, it's so hard when you see your
Yes.
kids being like bullied or judged by
Yes.
other people. Sometimes they don't want you to go fix the problem. You know, sometimes you have to ask them, how do you want me to help? You
Yes.
know, what is it that you want from me?
Right.
And helping, like sometimes they'll not want to deal with the problem. And so we'll have to have a series of talks about where their feelings are and why they don't want to deal with the problem and what's the consequence of not dealing with it. Truly,
Right.
some problems can't, like when you talk about the, you know, different conflict styles,
Mhm.
avoid is one of the conflict styles.
Yeah.
And there are times to use that appropriately, but you can't avoid all conflicts either.
Right. Right. Yes. I think
So,
this is that's an excellent situation or point to bring up, because I see on the other end as a teacher, when parents try to fight their kids' battles or like get involved with me, and
mhm,
especially when I teach seniors, you know, it's like by that point, I mean, as a parent, like I would want my daughter to be able to approach the teacher herself. Again, barring any weird circumstances. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But like as long as the teacher is there, or you know, like a reasonable teacher, right? I
right.
would want my daughters, and I would say this too, like even in middle school, I would always say to them if they had an issue, I said, "Did you talk to the teacher first?" And
Mhm,
if they did, and it wasn't getting resolved, and then I would say, "Would you like me to email? You know,
yeah,
would you like me to step in?" But I think it's important for them to learn how to speak up, advocate for themselves, not just with me, but with others out in the world, and not be afraid to contact the teacher, or you know, and ask for help in a way. Like I remember you know, for a while when I was young, I was afraid to ask for help because I thought it would make me seem weak or stupid at school. And so you know, I've taught my girls not to think that way. You know, my younger daughter, when I talk to her teachers, that's the one thing they're like, man, does she ask great questions? You know, and I always compliment her. I'm like, that is one thing I love about you, is that you ask great questions and you are not afraid to speak up and let people know what you need and what you want, and to deal with, you know, situations that arise, you know, giving them the courage and the tools to try at least themselves to try to take care of it. Of course, I always say Mama Bear is back here. You know,
yeah,
if things don't work out, like, you know, there's a balance, because I also think it's bad if adults are like, let them take care of it. Like when it comes to bullying, for example, you know, I don't think it's fair to expect a bullying victim to have to fix that problem. You
yeah.
know, like
I
you can
agree. There
speak
are
up, but like,
situations where help is appropriate
yes,
and necessary.
right. Especially
Yeah.
because we're adults, so we have more experience. I mean, hopefully we have, you know, more wisdom in terms of how to handle some of these very complex kind of situations, because again, human life is messy. It's difficult. Like conflict is hard. But if we take on the battles always ourselves, when the kids leave us, you know, which should happen inevitably, right? Again, if you're doing your job well, you know, the kid eventually would gain some strength and independence to go off on their own. You know, when my daughters are at college or whatever, I'm not there. Like I want them to feel like they can speak up, deal with the conflict themselves, but not be afraid to ask me for help. You know, if
Yeah.
necessary.
I feel like I was incredibly too successful in that area.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
and I laugh about it because, you know, it has to do with expectations. But when my kids were in elementary school, I would go to the parent teacher meetings. I would always bring the kids with me.
Hmm.
And if we were talking about we were always talking about the child. I
Hmm.
would ask the child, you know, what their opinion was of that
Yeah.
particular situation,
Mhm.
or bring them in on the conversation. So it wasn't just me and the teacher talking with the person, you know, not there or not included in the conversation. And then
Mhm.
when it came to middle school, like we don't have those meetings anymore,
Yeah.
except when there's trouble. And when
Well,
there's
yeah.
trouble, I would ask the kids.
Mhm.
Do you want to set up a meeting,
Mhm.
or do you want to handle this yourself?
Mhm.
And in some cases, they're like, well, I'm just going to figure it out on my own, which is a legitimate,
Mhm.
option. Or they want to handle it and talk to the teacher on their own,
Mhm.
which again is a legitimate thing. And then there's a few times when I got to be brought in because,
Mhm.
believe it or not all teachers are good and reasonable. So there are
Right, right.
teachers who are,
Right.
and
No, no,
especially,
I mean, I'm a teacher, so
I know,
I speak highly of the profession,
yes,
but just like any profession, there are some of us who do a better job than others, especially in areas of relationships with students in terms of like having compassion or empathy or
mhm,
differentiate. Like,
mhm,
we're supposed to differentiate how we teach based on the student's needs.
yeah.
And so there are some of us who do a better job of that than others, and I recognize that. So that's why I always say, like, have you talked to the teacher? What was the result of that? And then, yeah, I'll step in if I need to. Yeah.
When my kids were in elementary school, we have an option to put them into different academies for middle school and high school. Some school systems have that. So they have like, different types of focuses. So my daughter went to a middle school that had a focus in engineering, and
Mhm.
she got to do some 3D type of engineering stuff, which is really cool,
Mhm.
which is neat. And then my son went to a school that it was supposed to have pre-biotech, but they ended up cutting that program
Mhm.
before he was supposed to go into it, but he ended up taking cooking. They had a cooking school there, and he ended
Mhm.
up ending in that thing, waiting for
Mhm.
his biotech, and he never got the biotech,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But when it came to high school, they did the same thing. They selected their middle schools, they selected their high schools by
Mhm.
giving them options and letting them have a choice and a voice in what they were going to do. Now they just see education as their education, like not
Right.
something that's done to them. It's something
Right.
that they genuinely want to participate in. And now my son doesn't want to go to college. Like
Oh, okay.
he wants to go to a trade school, and that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Hey.
That's okay. I mean, we need
No,
people
that's
that
awesome.
he
I mean,
loves
if
auto
you
mechanics.
look at the research now, I mean, there are
Yeah.
some of these trades where they're desperate
Yeah,
for
that's why I said
people.
I'm too good at it, because here I am. My son's decided something that I didn't know that was on the table, but okay.
Yeah. Oh,
So
he
I
could be
love the
making a
fact that he
decent
feels
living. I
free enough
mean,
to make that choice for himself.
yeah. No, that's excellent. That's good.
Yeah, my
Right. They
daughter's
should have
choosing her
choices.
college. She's got all of all the scholarships lined up. She wanted this particular college more than any other. She did all the research on it. And so she chose her college. My son has chosen this particular trade school. He's only junior, so we're not
Yeah,
there
yeah.
yet. He graduates next year. So
Hmm.
it's really fascinating, but that's part of the skill of teaching your kids to be self advocates.
Right.
I can speak today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Teaching
I
our
think
kids
it's
to advocate
exciting.
for themselves.
I love it. I think it's exciting because if you have a certain mindset, it's kind of, to me, I'm loving to see what my kids do. Like, I would never have thought my daughter would do swimming. It's not that I thought she couldn't do it or anything. I wasn't
Mhm.
even on my radar. When she was like, I want to join this swim team, I was shocked. I was like, what? Okay. And then, of course, I was all behind it, and then she thrived in it, and it was great. So that was awesome. But I love, if you're seeing it in a certain way, it's like, it's exciting because you can't predict it, and it's like, I'm watching to see what they blossom into, what they bloom into, and and I'm just kind of like, because I don't have control over it, like that could be nerve-wracking, like, oh, I don't have control over it. But I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful just to watch and see, let them follow their passions and become who they are. And so I'm like, it's like watching a plant grow, right? Because you don't know exactly what it's going to turn out to be. I mean, even if you buy a certain type of seed, it's like each plant is different. Like, I don't know where's it going to go? What's it going to do?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I kind of like it,
Yeah. And okay, so I want to end with a quote
Mhm.
from my daughter, and then
Okay.
a summary of these things. So my daughter and I were talking about these topics, so it helped me
Mhm.
prepare for this. And one of the things she said is, like, we were talking about, like, how can I, like, I was sitting there going, yeah, I probably didn't do so good in that area.
Mhm. Yeah.
But she thinks I'm a great mom. So,
Mhm.
I come with, one testimonial for raising girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's 18, so I figure she's actually an adult now.
Yeah.
She said, I don't think you'll ever raise a child who doesn't have issues but you can raise them so they can manage them. And I think that's what my goal was, is not to raise a
Yeah.
perfect child. I'm not a perfect parent. I made a lot of mistakes, but
Right.
I of the things that we talked about, I was present with my kids, paying
Mhm.
attention, looking at them, trying to
Mhm.
see who they were. Like you said,
Mhm.
we don't know what they're going to grow up to be.
Mhm.
We just plant the seed and we watch it grow. And
Mhm.
so seeing how it's supposed to grow and how it's where it's leaning,
Mhm.
super fascinating. It's really neat to
Mhm.
release the expectations and let them be that individual that God created them to be,
Mhm.
to help them develop a growth mindset so that their relationship with failure is one that leads to further growth, not to
Mhm.
leading them to more of beating themselves up because they weren't enough or they weren't perfect.
Mhm.
And then to learn how to advocate for themselves, which requires an awareness of who they are, what
Mhm.
their limits are, and what they need when
Yes.
they feel like they're, for whatever, and frazzled, overwhelmed, whatever it is that you're feeling at that time.
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of like a summary of a lot of stuff we talked about. Do you have any other final points you want to add?
I mean, to me, it's just like honestly, just love is the heart of it. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, I always want them to feel like I love them no matter what and communicate. And if you love someone, you're gonna do the things we just said.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna want to nurture them, you're gonna wish the best for them. You're gonna want them to reach their potential. You're not gonna want to like squash them or to use like the light under the bushel. Like I don't want to put a bushel over their light. Like if you love someone, you want to see them glow, you want to see them succeed, and you're going to do your best to help that happen, right? And so no matter what, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with your daughter that I've told my kids, like, I'll pay for your therapy someday if I give you some issues, right? um
Yeah.
and we all have issues. I mean,
We all
there
do.
is no perfect childhood. Everybody is going to have some issues because again, life is hard. Being human is difficult, messy. um but at the end of the day, I want them to know that I love them unconditionally, no matter what. I am here for them, no matter what. And again, I connect that to God, and
Yeah.
and then I want them to know that loving God, I am, you know, like I am showing them God's love, just like I feel like, in the world, we as Christians, that's our mission, is to show God's love to the world. And as a parent, that's like my number one mission, is to show my love to my daughters so that they can spread that love, that they feel safe and loved enough to be who they want to be, to grow into the creation, the reach their potential, use their talents, etc. And so, to me, it's that feeling of safety, unconditional love, that like no matter what, I have that love no matter what. Like I don't. There've been studies, and they're silly studies, but it's amazing, like how much of a difference a loving relationship can have on a human being. I mean, studies of trauma on kids have said, like, if that child who has been traumatized, which is horrible, this happens, like those adverse childhood experiences, that study on ACE scores and
Yep.
things like that.
Mhm.
The studies all show that even one supportive relationship with a child can
Yep.
change that trajectory, and like, make it so that they don't have the same terrible outcomes that they might have had otherwise. And so I keep that in mind, both as a teacher and as a parent, that it's that loving relationship that is the core. I'll make mistakes, and I admit them to my daughters. I'm like, yep, I screwed that up, or sorry, I lost my temper, or mornings are crazy. Sometimes I fly off the handle. I'm like, oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. But at the end of the day, they know I love them, and I know they love me. And that's
Right.
what a relationship is about. And that to me is what parenting is about.
Yeah. And that's why we have to be really good at asking for forgiveness.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And then we know that, they can ask my forgiveness and they'll know I love them. We ask God's forgiveness. God will forgive us. Again, that's a
Yeah.
sense of safety, and it's the safety that I don't know. I didn't entirely feel like I had that growing up. I mean, my parents loved me, I did know that, but like, there was a lot of anxiety that I wasn't perfect and that I would be rejected or abandoned if I screwed up, you know. But love gives you that sense of safety that not if, but when I screw up, because, you know, we're all human, it'll be okay
Yeah,
because I'm
it's going to
loved.
be okay.
Right.
All right. I want to thank you for being on this show. I want to thank you for sharing from your experience.
Mhm.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I know this was awesome. I loved being part of this, and like I said, I've enjoyed listening to you on my drive to work. So,
Thank you. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
this was great, and you know, and I'm very passionate about being a mother. It's one of the most important things in my life. So I really enjoyed talking about it with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mhm.
And then if you're watching the show or listening on podcast, I want to thank you for listening in. And if you're raising daughters, I just want to believe that God is going to make a big difference in the life of your daughters and in you by raising them. There's so much more about this topic that we could not cover in this one hour episode, but you can get the books that we're going to recommend. There's a new book that came out. I'm going to look at it before I put a link down to it. It just came out yesterday. So we're going to include that if it's a good one as well. So God bless, and I hope you have a beautiful day.